And then I'm gonna start sharing my screen for the PowerPoint slide. So just want to get everyone's opinion in this room about the MOS definition we put together. Any feedback on that?
Could you put that back up on the screen
Yep.
for us?
So this is the definition. Any elements that you think is missing from the definition?
I don't want to be too picky here, but the second paragraph is a little clunky.
Okay.
I think, first of all, did you mean to say MOS provides alternatives?
Yes, basically alternative mobility options other than private car vehicles. Any other feedback on this? If not, we can move on to the next one. So any feedback on the policy framework we have listed there? This is the policy framework we developed. Infrastructure, data technology, management, operations, governance, institution, finance, and public education.
I think there's also legal challenges. So I don't know if that's just included in governance or management and operations, but one of the things that we've run into at Metro is contracting between government and private mobility companies. So I think at least transit agencies, we would all benefit from some templates or some help with those types of things. So you think that's in governance? I'm fine with.
Yeah, I think we mentioned
it as a sub something.
Sub, okay. So could you be more specific on the legal challenge you had with the private companies? Is it about data sharing or just
data sharing is something completely different, and I think that's covered in data and technology. But I'm talking about actually contracting with the mobility companies. The contracts are a challenge because they really haven't. There aren't a whole lot of them to look at, and so at least we hadn't found any. So we felt like we were kind of blazing our way there.
Yeah. Do you also mean, Robin, do you also mean just sort of basic procurement reform as well? That our procurement policies are make it very difficult to.
I think that's totally included in that. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Could I add institutionalized racism here?
Okay, institutional racism, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of if you only look at what you have and then you can't pay attention to who you've left out. And so if you look at all of these systems are based on the idea that we have been inclusive, and that's just not the case.
Okay.
So specifically around payments, which is a big thorny issue in our universe, right? Where there are some people that pay cash and they probably don't want to pay in cash, or they would like to also have a digital alternative, but we have structural racism, so they don't get that. And transportation has had to deal with that, or has chosen to deal with that in particular ways.
Okay, to me, it seems like a combination of technology and public education.
Nope, that's incorrect.
Okay, so you think it's its own category here?
I know that it's its own category. So in the United States, in order to have a payment credential, a debit or credit card, you have to give a commercial bank $300 minimum balance. If you can't keep that minimum balance, you get feed to death, and you have to pay exorbitant fees that people under a certain income cannot afford. And we have allowed the financial industry to put those a very expensive thresholds in place in exchange for a basic account. Nowhere else in the world works this way. There, Ben and I were talking about this in the chat. There are some similarities in parts of the South America, which is also very cash reliant. But generally in the rest of the world, there is a basic payment credential that's either, if you can't get a bank account, one is provided by the government. In the UK, for example, it's the Royal Mail. There's a Royal Mail account that you can use to write checks and make basic account. It doesn't mean that you have money in it, but if you put money in it and you can get money, it allows you to both get money and to spend money. And we don't have that in the United States.
Got it.
Victor, I think just to follow up on the meeting we had on Monday, we brought that up with our LIFT program that we did at SBCTA. That was one of the concerns we had, was that issue that not everyone has access to his credit card, no one has a smartphone. So we had to do the call-in service, and with the option of they can get one of those prepaid credit cards. And then just to add on to what Jillian's also saying is that we find that at least in San Bernardino County, we notice that, some people have smartphone, but they can only afford to do the single ride.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do, or I think what Omnitrans is working towards is, okay, once they pay for the single ride, once they get to the full amount of a month pass, and then they stop having to pay for those single rides. So I think that's what the challenge is. You might not know, but I agree with Jillian. I think it's its own category.
Yeah, so an example of that, probably folks in mobility who are just thinking about mobility as a service as a technology problem don't know, is that, for instance, Uber was going to be a bank. They're going to try to do what Amazon did with Prime, and they shifted course and moved into Uber Eats. But for a while, they were really thinking about becoming a bank and issuing. And so early on, like in 2014 or 2013, Uber realized that they couldn't really grow in the United States, certainly, which is their core market, let alone in places like the global South, because Uber's original business model was pay by credit card or pay by debit card, which assumes that you have a bank account. That's just not true in the United States, and therefore that limits the number of customers that Uber can have. So Uber didn't talk about this too much, but they created a cash top-up program, sort of retail network cards. So if you want to get, you can top up your Uber account for free at any CVS in the United States. You can bring your cash and put it onto a prepaid debit card that you don't pay for because Uber pays for it, so that you can use the Uber system. And 43% of Uber's transactions in the United States are cash-based transactions. So that should really tell you something about how prevalent this problem is in the United States. But Uber is not a bank. And we shouldn't be banks either.
Got it. All right. That sounds like this is really its own category.
Oh, yeah.
From all different perspectives. Great. Any other feedbacks on the framework? Looks like no. Let's move on to. I don't know if you were able to get a good understanding of the existing conditions, so I'm gonna. We have some detailed slides here. Is there anything that that you're particularly interested? I'll move on to that slide. So we have infrastructure, we have data technology, we have management and operation, we have finance, we have governance, institution, and public acceptance.
Could we add something like, it's maybe related to what Robin was thinking about. I'm curious about Robin's perspective. So we don't have a culture of cooperative procurement. So everybody goes out for their own and buys their own thing, which ensures that we have these teeny tiny market shares, unless you're Robin, right? If you're talking about LA Metro and you have some places that are big and they get a kind of market size. That in transportation, we have, in California, we have over 440 transit agencies, and they each have teeny tiny market shares. And some of them are so small that they can't even procure for themselves. So what you see, at least from where I sit, over and over again, is that the vendor community isn't providing products, it's not worth it for them to provide products because they have to spend so much money executing contracts, so many different contracts. And their buyer, the agencies can't really afford a product, can't even afford to define a product, let alone pay for it. And so it just doesn't work, right? So like we need real-time information, but what we see at the state level is that everybody wants to do GTFS real-time, but the products to produce real-time data do not, the vendors who provide those are either too expensive for most agencies or they're not compliant. And they don't have enough of a business case to invest in modernizing their code or infrastructure.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
I agree with you, Jillian. I do believe that if we're trying to do something comprehensive across a broad area, I mean, yes, Metro has some strength because we have 26 agencies that we're purchasing things for. But if we're trying to do it on a broader area than that, we don't have any, procurement means to do something where we could do good for everyone, right. Do it at a discount and include all of those small properties that normally wouldn't be served. And so, I think one of the hopes for this MOS Alliance is that we all come together and are able to do things as a group that we might not be able to do as small entities.
Yeah, so I agree. And so what you may not know in this study is that the states, each state, as well as the federal government, have a get out of jail procurement jail-free card, which is that we can do master service agreements that anyone can use as long as they can generate the authority to purchase from us. Unlike local agencies, we don't have to co-procure with anybody else, name who else we're buying it for. We can say, we don't have to specify the quantities. We can simply say, we are paying 50 cents for a stapler and anybody that wants to buy a 50-cent stapler can buy it from us. That is part of the United States Constitution. So that's the right level at which to do this. It already exists, but there's not a strong culture and this is about educating the agencies really, not the public. There's not a strong culture of working with the state to exercise the power the buying power that it has for this sector.
Right. And I think one of the things that we definitely need then is the ability for us to understand what that power is and then, go do it on a broad scale.
Exactly. That's right. And so I guess maybe I would add what I would say is like the section should be something like, I just was looking at this code the other day. What the hell is it? It's like the Public Contracting Code section 10298 or 299. Something we should all learn about.
All right, so what I'm getting from all the conversation discussions are two main points. Is one, vendors should be able to provide more real-time data collection technologies for transit agencies to enable them to basically comply to the standards and provide the real-time data. The second one is we need to foster like a strong agency culture, local transit agency culture to work with state to exercise the buying power in the private sector procurement process.
Just procurement, period.
Procurement, okay.
And it might be transit learning that it's not really different from public health, or right? Like a lot of times we try to solve. I would say that the comment is something like we look at our problems in a silo. And we've forgotten that we don't always have to do it that way.
So we look at specifically transportation problems or general problems?
General. We've made the mistake of thinking that general problems are transportation problems and tried to solve them with our own means. And that costs us a lot of money and doesn't provide the customer with what they really need or what's fair.
Great.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me? This is Marcel Porras from LADOT.
Hey, Marcel.
Hi, Marcel.
Hey,
Hey, Marcel.
hey, everybody. Sorry for being. I had to pitch in for Salita today. I was supposed to be at this call at 10 until she couldn't do her 10 that she was. Anyway, I've been listening in, and I just want to second a lot of the comments that have been made. You know, Jillian, I definitely agree. It's a question around procurement. It's a question about leveraging buying power. I think that it's super, you know, I got to say, in terms of my conversation that I've had with Lily and Hunter, the work that y'all are doing is, and I think that the work that we're doing with Metro and Robin and her team is, we're trying to lay some groundworks for some of these elements that has to do with like community engagement, thinking about equity, thinking about bringing on multiple service providers. You know, but I think we do have a current constraint on our technology that doesn't but you know, I think this is like a multi-year effort, right? And so first and foremost, having the state really lead on these conversations and starting to do some of this pilot work is really meaningful. I think in Los Angeles, you know, there's a separate effort, right, that I think folks are familiar with, the Angelino card. I think we've had some conversations with them. I don't know if it necessarily solves the issue in the way that the issue that you stated in terms of access to banking, but I think there is a coalition and a lot of lifting that's been done. And so figuring out how to kind of meld some of these initiatives, because I think what they have there is a lot of political support, right? And a lot of use cases that have been done. And so, so I think that's just another opportunity. I know, you know, again, you know, I know that Hunter, you know, has some relationships there with that. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to link in with that, Gene or Jillian, but I think that's another key piece we should look at. But you know, what LADOT can offer from our perspective is as the city of Los Angeles, I think this is work that we're very interested in, right? Because I think it's taking on a bigger perspective than just saying MOS, right? Because I feel like we've all talked about MOS for, you know, decades. And I think the key element here that I think you're getting at, Jillian, is that there needs to be a broader like political will, a statewide will, or even if not a national will. And with that comes like, okay, what are the policies that are being done at the state? What are the funding opportunities that can be made available either through the state budget, through lobbying, you know, the federal budget, you know, and going after pilots. I think if I'm not mistaken, we wrote a letter of support for a ATC MTD grant to kind of start moving this along to the work. And so, you know, we're here as partners and, you know, and willing to kind of incubate some of these ideas in some way through our work with Metro, but if not, as our own standalone transit agency in LADOT Transit. So, you know, we're excited to be part of the coalition, because I feel like SCAG has done a good job of assembling kind of the right people into the conversation. And so I just wanted to kind of, I'm not sure if my numbers coming up is just my numbers. I just wanted to say hello.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
That's cool. Thank you so much. So listening to what Marcel said, because I think it's right, there's a lot of really interesting bits and pieces that could be put together or not, right? That are like, we're starting to get our arms around the problem. I guess what I would like to propose is that maybe another thing that's missing is kind of a product mapping exercise. Like, what is the product and who is the customer and what are the respective roles? And I think that transit should take a look at that, because we've kind of tried to be all things for all people and invented our own flavors of money and payment systems, and now we're in technology business, and those are all really expensive things, but we kind of don't have enough transit, and we don't have enough, we have no ridership, certainly at the moment, and our customer often happens to be the same customer of some other thing. So we might want to rejigger our definition of what the product is and what our role is in the product universe. And if we find that there are gaps, we need to question who solves the gap and at what level. And I think you get to ask yourself that question if you're as lucky to be as large as California and its incredible cities and transit operators.
So to kind of piggyback your question, Jillian, I haven't this been part of the purpose of Cal ITP trying to solve, like
A little bit, yeah.
okay.
We definitely have been attacking some of those issues. I mean, so if you're a private business person, often what you focus on what is the product, and then how do I distribute it? I need a product and a distribution channel. And you can have a great product, but no way to distribute it, and vice versa. You can have a great distribution system and not a great product. And I think on the whole, transit is sort of in the second category, where we have a really awesome distribution network. We have all these agencies and all these people and all these stakeholders and all these politicians, but we have a kind of failing product, or a not well enough understood product to optimize it. But if you flip that around and say that's actually an opportunity, you say, well, wait, we have this awesome distribution network. What if we really think about, like, what is the missing piece of the product? We could instead put the right product out, or put another product out that we need to in order to get our product to work, right? And that kind of mapping is not something necessarily that we've done in our industry. And we are trying to take on bits and pieces of that at Cal ITP where it makes sense for the state to do this, but we're not a DOT is not doesn't run transit.
Mm-hmm.
We're largely a grants management agency, and we can make other agencies at the state, at the state do things in partnership. So we have some of the tools.
So it looks like a lot of at least in this breakout room, voice the necessity of having like statewide leadership to really guide this process. Do you have?
Or federal. I mean, if we had a stronger federal government that would pay attention to this kind of stuff, we might be able to get there. But I think if you went into Pete Buttigieg and you said, we need to make sure that every American can get a basic financial account, whether they have money in it or not, like the basic plumbing of transacting needs to exist in the United States, or else transit will never succeed. I think you'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about, right? So that's probably not a conversation to have with Mayor Pete first. It's probably a conversation to have like with the banking people, right? Like, they would understand this. They tried to give every American $1,200 a few months ago, and a lot of Americans never got it, or they paid hundreds of dollars in check cashing fees because they don't have a direct deposit relationship with the IRS, because they don't have a payment credential. They don't have a commercial bank account, right? Like, this is a huge problem, an almost insurmountable transit problem, and it's not a problem that transit should be solving, at least not by itself. And we need to figure out a way to send that message, or else I don't think that we're going to succeed. We're just going to wind up spending a lot of money doing a bunch of patchwork things, when at the end of the day, what people need is a payment credential that they can use to buy transit and coffee and dry cleaning, everything. It should be a general purpose account. Or else all of our very well-meaning products that help them, are just a patchwork of shit they have to carry in their wallet. Like, do we actually want a social safety net? And do we really care about equity? Or do we care about, are we putting ourselves in the role of the customer and saying, well, I want to build this really cool thing. Maybe technology will solve my problem, and I'm going to solve it this way. We spend a lot of money that way, and we can't really fix the problem.
Hey, Jillian, hallelujah. But like, what do you think in terms of, like, I agree, right? It sounds, I hadn't thought about it and I actually had not identified that barrier. But is there a way to pilot that, right? In, let's say, Los Angeles, right? You
Yeah,
know,
well, that's,
we
I think,
have this.
yes, that's what we're trying to do with the FHWA grant, right? Like, you know, we could say we've learned a bunch of things with TAP, right? For instance, or, you know, various different payment credentials that you can outreach to a lot of people and, you know, connect them to services. But it doesn't help them, you know, they get off the bus and then they still don't have a payment credential that works at Starbucks or the dry cleaner, right? So let's find a general purpose, put together a general purpose account team, and demonstrate that it works. And we've already, I think we've kind of nibbled away at that with Cal ITP. That is exactly what we're doing with our 4 demonstrations already with SAC-RT, with Monterey Salinas, and with the 2 Santa Barbara properties. So in Monterey, rather than issue a courtesy card or whatever, we're getting rid of those things, and we're working with Square. And Square debit cards are free as long as you can establish know your customer, right? Square will issue you a debit card. I'm holding mine. And they issue contactless debit cards that work, you know, as long as you put money in the account, you can get coffee. And in Monterey, you can also get transit that way. And Square is investing in transit discounts. You get a transit discount, you get $1 off your fare in Monterey if you pay with a Square debit account.
So I think those are great additions to what we have now, but I think we also have to look at what we're taking away when we do those types of things. So yes, it would be great to put you know, some kind of a debit card or a payment card in the hands of all. However, when we do that, we are taking away some things that we would have to fix on the back end then, such as now I don't have any way to determine if I am a senior or if I am a student or if I am, I mean, yes, there's ideas for that, Jillian, but they're not ready for prime time. So
they're ready for prime time. We're doing them. So that one, I think I'm happy to explain the solution that we're working on there. I do agree that, like, I'm going to disagree with you about the payment credential piece, because that we can always fix that. What might be our role as transit agencies is, like, so unlike any other merchant, transportation merchants demand to know a lot more about their customer. Like, if I go and buy dry cleaning, the dry cleaner doesn't have to have me download an app where I have to tell them my name, my bank account number, and all sorts of stuff. And then they track all of my purchases, right? Like, you just give them your payment card and you pay for the product.
Yeah, we don't have that we have the opportunity for anonymous customers at Metro too.
Right.
But the dry cleaner doesn't say, hey, I'll give you a discount if you're a student or if you are a disabled person.
But the dry
cleaner don't have that opportunity. So how did we get that in with what you're talking about? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we do. It's pretty easy. So that's exactly what we're doing with Cal ITP. So protected classes or defined classes of customers, how you have a technical account manager can be fairly easily done. The core required discounts that we call discounts in transit, that when we use the term discount totally differently, those are functions of identity, and the DMV knows that about almost everybody anyway.
Right. So is there a pilot in place that has low income, seniors, students, and
not all of those
disabled folks?
Yeah, we've started with seniors. We're going to add the other categories. And yes, that's what we're doing with Monterey Salinas.
So the answer is 1 out of those 4 categories right now. That's all I'm saying, is there's a lot of work to be done there.
Well, but the architecture is the same. The fact that you're hooking to a different piece of data is not an architectural discussion, it's a policy discussion.
Well, they're all different groups, and I'm not sure that our low income customer is in that same DMV database as
That's right.
everybody else.
Well, that's right, but that's where you and I like have taken different paths, right? Do we say they may not be in the DMV path, and therefore we need to create a new DMV and create that function? Or do we say, how do we get them into the DMV? Why are they not in the DMV? And how do we attack that?
I think, so you and I are saying much of the same thing.
Yes.
It's a great system, but there are definitely things that we've got to do to be able to make it do some of the things that, say, our smart cards are already doing.
Well,
and so those are the things that we have to work on to make sure that we're inclusive to all the customers that we are currently serving.
Right, I think that's important. But in our fixation on the current customers, we've locked out everyone else in California. Like 97% of California doesn't even ever think about taking transit. And a lot of it is because we won't take their money.
Yeah, I can only speak for Metro, and we definitely still use cash, and all of our systems have a way for you to put cash into the smart card. So
yeah, but 97% of Californians have a bank card. They don't use cash, right? So we are fixated on the cash paying customer, and that's important. That's our job as public officials, is to make sure that they have a way to pay. But we've said, here's this artisanal way to pay. But there's a bigger problem here, which is they can't pay anywhere, and the world is not moving towards cash, it's moving away from cash. And the longer we don't have this discussion, the longer we abandon those people. And in under 3 years, the experience of you and me as customers that the commercial banks want is going to get 1,000 times better, 6 times faster, and we will leave our cash paying customers and our industry in the dust. And we've already put in more and more money for declining ridership. So we really have to tackle this issue, right?
So Jillian, so what you're proposing is basically for transit agencies to, or like other agencies, to help those cash payment population to shift away from cash payment
to introduce a digital payment option, and to really attack why people are not using it. And our hypothesis in Cal ITP is that the reason they're not using it is because they don't have one. And that's our job as public officials, is to make those available, a general purpose account.
So, hey, Jillian, Manish here. I report to Robin. So one question, oftentimes when we heard about the LIFE program, what we get from the LIFE administrators is most of the people want to stay anonymous, right? They don't want to give any information and all. So sometimes these people feel like, oh, if I have to use a digital payment method, I will be tracked. So how do we take care of those people, or how do we educate them that you're not being tracked?
Right. So I think that's an interesting question. So what I would say is, I think, so there's app fatigue, right? Because in our desire, and everybody's desire to own the customer, we over ask. And the private sector is learning that that's a mistake and deprecating that as much as possible. The know your customer rules they're exercising the very minimum. I think what we've experienced in transit is a customer saying, I already have a payment credential. I don't want to surrender my payment credential or have to sign up for another payment credential from you in which I have to give the same information. That's an invasion of my privacy. But I think that question arises for most Californians because we won't let them pay with the account they already have. So let me return the question. Of your customers that don't want to give you more information, how many of them are buying a tap card using their own personal debit or credit card at your machines?
A lot.
A lot.
Yeah. Right.
The great majority.
Correct. Right. So they don't want to personalize their tap card, because they're like, why, I have money, why do I have to, you know, I have a personal, my account is with my bank. My banker knows about me and knows my social security number and all that sort of stuff. I don't have to give that stuff to another person.
Yeah, it's definitely an area, it's an area of challenge. But that being said, like most folks have in the research we have about like why folks are underbanked, the big thing that comes out why people are underbanked is like basically fees, and like we're eating people's money, which is very reasonable when you're talking about, you know, if you do not have savings at all, like losing $20 is a catastrophic event. If we can eliminate that barrier, this payment conversation does get easier. But also, this all doesn't preclude agencies making the choice of like doing both. You know, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Right.
As is true in all of CaliTP's demo, as is going to be true with ATCMD, which is like, let's approach this problem from both the ends, both bringing our existing users along and adding as many new users to the system before,
right.
Like, we're not going to solve all of this in one day or even all one grant. Also, Manish, Robin, good to see you.
Yep.
Not in mad chat conversations as we try to finish stuff up. But I think one thing that has not necessarily been talked about that I'd also like to focus on the common carrier obligations of private mobility operators, which is another sort of area that I think, like, you know, as public agencies, we're all doing our best, and then we have outright segregationist practices being done by public agencies, discriminating on costs, and not living up to what their common carrier obligations of saying, you know, Jillian, you're going to pay $7 and Hunter, you're going to pay $12 because of like what we know about you as a customer. And that's another thing I just wanted to kind of add in there once I got my mic figured out. But again, like none of these are all going to be solved at once, but
in a day, exactly.
You know, in a day or a conversation. Right. So,
right.
What are we doing here? What are we doing here then?
Well, I think if we could kind
just kidding.
I think if we could kind of agree that we need to map these things and really produce a roadmap and say, well, yeah, actually it would be better if everybody, if payment providers, there was as much competition for the homeless guy, or, you know, maybe, you know, my daughter, or I don't know, you know, like a senior or whatever, somebody of lower income, lower stature who's underbanked or unbanked in California, say, which is 11 million people. If there was as much competition for those 11 million people's payment account as it was for Marcella and Jillian, right? Like that, if we say that that's our ultimate goal, a general purpose account, then what are the steps to doing that? Using if that's the product, and what we're using our distribution network to deliver that, or deliver our piece of that, what does that look like?
Can I just switch gears for 1 second? And I also think that we have built these giant transit systems, right? And one of the you know, barriers for us is a lot of infrastructure that has, you know, been paid for, and we all have maintenance contracts. We're all at different stages in the state, right, of where we are in these huge contracts. We have to figure out some way, if we're going to move forward with either some state help or some, you know, some kind of assistance to get us all in the same place so that we can make these switches. Because right now, I think the reluctance on, say, San Francisco's part and Los Angeles's part to, you know, have a wholesale change in the way we do business is just based on costs and what we would have to do to change everything over to a new system. So, you know, this is, you know, kind of the big elephant in the room. Yes, we'd all like to do this, but, you know, how do we move towards that and all kind of do it at the same time, right?
Yep, here. I totally agree with you. And I think the approach that we've taken, which is maybe something that we should look at in this, is, so from a CaliTP perspective, what we've been doing is examining the navel of the Division of Rail and Mass Transit. So it turns out that if you get money from us, because we're the federal pass-through agency, in general, we know what you buy. So one way, yes, you're going to need more money and so a lot of help to make a transition. It's going to be a lift. But we can probably do that more efficiently if we get everybody's contracts out on the table and we kind of say, okay, in 6 months, the CAD AVL system of these 5 transit agencies expires. So they may not have a history of procuring together, and maybe they don't need a history of procuring together, but could we make sure that there's a cost-efficient, code-compliant solution available in time for those contracts to end? And then kind of exert gentle pressure to say, hey, agencies, don't procure for yourselves. Consider looking at this catalog of products, and we happen to know that you're going to have this decision in 5 months. And then maybe we put a little money in at the state level to sweeten it even more or something like that. But some of it is because we just don't have this culture of sharing information at the contractual level. And we keep seeing, that's one of the things that big things that we've learned with Cal ITP is like in the real time, the general transit feed specification real time discussion, like we see the same error of like, here's why this transit agency is not compliant with GTFS for this reason. But you see the same reason here and here and here and here. Oh, it turns out that it's that vendor. And so we need a way to put a collective way to put pressure on that vendor. And maybe it's because the state puts out an RFP and we buy the right thing and we ask, here's the alternative when your contract is over, right? But that, I'm trying to add to your point where I think that is maybe not as big a lift as we think it is if we do it as a group.
As a group, yeah.
And as a group, we also have much more leverage over the vendors because right now the vendors know that we don't understand really necessarily always what we're procuring for everybody. And they run circles around us. Or they know that they have to deal with 440 of us. So they're, they spend a lot of money on legal fees instead of upgrading their infrastructure. Like CAD AVL is a great example of this at the moment where CAD AVL, like the vendors, they're producing automatic vehicle location based on their radios, right? Because that's how they're communicating vehicle location is on the radios that the FTA requires, and those are operating on the 3G network, right? Like you can produce a vehicle location with a cheap GPS tracker for, a fraction of the cost. But if you've already got a contract with, X, Y, or Z CAD AVL vendor, what do you do then?
Yeah. Another just like kind of how does this pull back to MAS sort of thing is one on the contracting side, definitely participation from agencies and figuring out like what exactly do we like, because again, the state of California, while we do have this authority, does not have a ton of expertise in like what exactly you all need.
Right.
So like we're happy to ask for it, but when we get, we'll hear from our folks being like, why are you asking for this? And then we need people to say like, well, I'm going to buy it. And this is what I want. So there's that. But going back to MAS, like, what are these constituent components of MAS? And like what I'd love to see this working group come out with is like, what does every agency need to support MAS? And like, how can they buy it? What does the market need? What does the state need? What does the private sector operator need? Like, what is that list of like, if you think of it in terms of like a user journey of like in this MAS world, like figuring out like what your identity is and communicating these sort of low, discounts is important. Like what is, and like, getting that collective vision, it's the very first meeting, but like having that mapped out of like what needs to be available to transit agencies, available to cities, available to the state, and available to the customer, and then working backwards from there of how we're going to make it available.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, Hunter. I mean, I think, we have first of all, I can't see who from SCAG's on the line, but this is great that you all are convening this conversation, right? Because I think SCAG, I think if we're not just tackling LA through having SCAG convene us at this level, but there is a regional conversation happening here that goes beyond just LA County, and could also loop in MetroLink. I think we have a really willing leader at Metro in Stephanie, who is has a lot of relationships regionally now because of her previous stint at Metrolink.
Yep.
And is interested in really understanding how we can prepare for the Olympics, right? And again, not having an opinion on how people feel about the Olympics, it is going to be this political moment that we can work towards to drive these things so that LA can leave a legacy. And I really see this as the type of legacy, especially when people are going to be coming from all over the world and who already can access mobility really seamlessly. And then they're going to come to LA and be like, I need to rent a car. Right?
I need to download your app, right? Like, in the realm of payments,
exactly.
They're already doing contactless bank card payments. That's how they pay for everything, including.
Julian, I'm surprised you don't know. You don't have to download an app if you have an iPhone.
If you have an iPhone, yeah.
Then your Apple Wallet.
Yeah, because you guys paid
automatically
a nice custom.
You paid nothing for that.
Because you're a fancy customer and Apple is willing to pay for you. How's that playing in Stockton, Robin?
Well, it's for 26 agencies in 11 million strong LA County, so it's not so bad. Not so bad.
No, that's great. I mean, but you can't lift everybody, and that's the thing is we do need to lift everybody, right? We do.
Well, listen. I think if I can just jump in, right, because Metro's our partner, and I know the big lift that Robin and David have had to do. And I think to your point, Robin, like this is going to require resources, a lot of them, right? But I think that it's not just about resources. It's about doing the mapping in terms of like what we're trying to do.
Right.
Because in order to be successful, it's not just the technology solution, but it's like, why are we doing it? And I think there's a really, moment, a policy window right now where we're talking about things like universal basic income, right? Yeah. Where, Salida was able to convince the city council to put a $4 million line item titled UBM, right? For us to.
Looks like we have 1 minute left.
Yeah. So, the other thing, just to finish my thought, is like the mayor, and the council also put a bunch of line items in around UBI, right? And so, it is a good time to kind of bring these conversations together. But, to kind of back Robin up a little bit, like Robin can nod her head all day, but I think it really is being really tactical in terms of what is actually is the roadmap to doing this, and at what point does a Metro take this to their board, right?
Well, that's right. Right. And what do you leverage? Where do you add to existing? Which pieces do you pull out? Like, we definitely want to leverage as much as we can, but what are those things that you want to leverage and keep?